Today, we are diving into one of the most fascinating and, honestly, challenging questions you'll find anywhere, and we're drawing it right from the ancient book of Judges. It's this paradox that we see play out over and over again, right? You have these incredibly gifted leaders who pull off these stunning public victories, only to completely self-destruct in their private lives. So let's explore why that happens.
I mean, this is the heart of it, isn't it? It's the question that just hangs in the air. It feels so modern, like something we'd read in the headlines today, but it is an ancient problem. How can one person be so disciplined, so effective, so heroic in one part of their life, and then be an absolute chaotic mess in another? The stories in Judges really wrestle with this tension, and the answers they offer, well, they're incredibly relevant for us today.
All right, let's just jump right in with our first case study, a guy named Gideon. Just look at this slide. On the left, you've got a national hero. This is the man who, with God's help, defeated a massive army with just 300 guys and brought peace to the land for 40 years. I mean, what an incredible public success story. But then, you look at the other side, a private life that was just unraveling, marked by polygamy, a total lack of discipline at home, which led directly to one of his own sons murdering 69 of his brothers. The contrast it's just jarring, and it really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack.
Now, here's the thing. Gideon's story isn't just some random one-off tragedy. Nope. It's actually part of a much larger, predictable pattern that just keeps repeating all throughout the book of Judges. The source material basically calls it a downward spiral. And if we're going to understand why these heroes kept falling, we first have to understand the anatomy of that spiral.
So, the engine that drives this entire era is something the text calls the cycles of disobedience. The best way to think of it is like a historical rinse and repeat cycle of failure. Seriously, this same pattern happened at least 7 times over about 350 years, and with each rotation, things just got worse. The moral compass got weaker, and the quality of leadership just spiraled further and further down. So, what does this cycle actually look like? Well, it's a pretty simple 4-step process. First up, sin. The people turn their backs on God and start serving idols. Step 2, servitude. As a direct result, they fall under the oppression of their enemies. Then comes step 3, supplication. They're miserable, so they cry out for help. And finally, step 4, salvation. God hears them and raises up a leader, a judge, to save the day. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. After the rescue, the peace never, ever lasts. The cycle always begins again. Okay, so let's circle back to Gideon, because his story is a perfect example of how this all plays out. He shows up in the 4th cycle, and his story, it really marks a turning point in the book. He's absolutely a hero, no doubt about it, but his private compromises planted the seeds for the absolute disaster that would follow him and his family. You know, what's so amazing here is the sheer scale of Gideon's public victory. The story actually describes him as starting out as a total coward, hiding from his enemies in a wine press, but God transforms him. And this number, 300 against 135,000, that's not about military genius, it's about making a point. The victory was designed to be so ridiculous that no one could claim credit. It was proof that salvation comes, and I quote, not by might nor by power, but by God's Spirit. But then, this is where the paradox just slams you in the face. The same man who showed such incredible dependence on God in public utterly failed to apply that same discipline privately. He had many wives, a practice the scriptures explicitly warn leads to disaster. He was great at tearing down public idols, but he completely failed to build a righteous order in his own home. And this wasn't just some private matter. It had devastating national consequences, unleashing his power-hungry son Abimelech, who went on to murder his own brothers. If you take one thing away from Gideon's life, it's this powerful statement right here. It is the core thesis of these stories. No amount of public applause, no amount of fame or success can ever make up for a collapse of character behind closed doors. The private life will always, eventually, bleed into the public legacy. And if Gideon's story is a warning, then our final case study, Samson, well, his is the ultimate tragedy. This is where that downward spiral we've been talking about just hits rock bottom. Samson is a man with unbelievable, supernatural gifts, but they are matched by an equally powerful and ultimately fatal character flaw. I mean, just look at this resume. Samson's life reads like a superhero comic book. He was set apart for God from the moment he was born, given this insane, superhuman strength. Tearing a lion apart with his bare hands, taking out an entire enemy platoon with the jawbone of a donkey, these aren't just feats of strength.
They are signs of a massive, massive divine gift. The guy had more power than anyone.
And yet, for all that power, for all those gifts, here is the final diagnosis on his life. He wasn't truly defeated by his enemies, the Philistines. He wasn't some victim of circumstance. The source material is crystal clear on this. Samson was defeated by himself. His greatest enemy was the one living inside him.
So what was this internal enemy? The text gives us this memorable idea of failing the beauty test. It's a great phrase for a timeless problem, right? It's a total lack of self-control, especially when it came to his passions. Samson was a slave to what he saw, a slave to his impulses. He constantly made choices based on what looked good rather than on his divine calling and his principles. In the end, his immense physical strength was totally useless against the weakness of his own unguarded heart.
So what's the takeaway from all these ancient dramatic stories? Well, they're not just history lessons. They're basically a timeless leadership seminar. They reveal a fundamental truth about the relationship between power, gifting, and the absolute non-negotiable necessity of character. This famous quote, which Jesus himself echoes centuries later, is really the ultimate summary of the entire book of Judges. Great gifts, great power, great influence, they all come with an equally great weight of responsibility. Both Samson and Gideon were given so much, but they failed to grasp that the gift required a disciplined life to manage it properly.
And it really leaves us with a final provocative thought. We might not be out there tearing lions apart, but we all have our own areas of gifting and influence. We all face our own versions of the beauty test, our own temptations to let some private compromise undermine our public integrity. So the question these stories leave us isn't just about them, it's about us. Where is your character being tested the most? Because that's the place where real strength is truly forged.